Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, the artist behind Bigelow Fine Arts. Today I'm working on some of the smaller elements I haven't hit yet, as well as some of the caves and backgrounds of the meteor. Tomorrow will be the next video in the candle series. I will be resuming the meteor on Monday. I just started up on MeWe and would love to build a coloring community there with everyone. If there is enough interest, I'd love to start a group for everyone to share their art, talk art, and discuss supplies. It is free to join MeWe and participate. Just skip the free trial. My pencils are sharpened and I'm ready to get going. Come along and join me and let's color this in together. I'm picking up with the background today. I felt if I could block in more background, it might give me an idea of what coral I still had left to work on and might help with my color choices. I'm coming in with more of the warm gray 5 and blocking in all the places I think are rocks or old coral. Once I have everything blocked in as best I can, I'm bringing in the dark sepia to add in shadows and more texture to the rocks. I go around some of the lumpy parts, which adds in a bit of the texture. I also give the interior of the cave some dark sepia, even though they are mostly filled in by the artist. The black ink is rather flat, so some sepia over top helps give it some more character. When I blocked in the background, I found more of the finger coral, so I'm going to fill them in since I already know what color I want them to be. I gave them a base layer of the cobalt green. They are pretty small and could be considered part of the cave, but I decided to color them up to give the cave a pop of color. Once I have all the little clumps filled in, I used the grass green to color in the tips of the fingers. There are a few more fingers under the sea turtle, so I hit them up as well, using the green on the tips and the cobalt green at the base. I came in with the cobalt blue greenish to fix up the shadows for the new clumps, as well as going through and touching up shadows on some of the other clumps. I bring in more sepia to darken up the shadows for the cave. The more I work on the little things, the more little things I see. I find more clumps of finger coral, so I color them up as well. I'm going to treat this coral similar to the layered coral, but maybe a little bit more on the purple side. I give them a light layer with the cobalt blue greenish. I put a touch of the magenta at the bottom for some shadow, then I come over the top with the scarlet to create a deep purple. I put in more magenta to add in more shadows under the lobes. I blend in more of the blue-greenish on top. I went with something more purple rather than the blue I used before to try something different. It also helps it stand out from the large blue fan right above it. I could have made it blue and blended into the fan so it looked to be part of the same coral structure. Either works. I just chose to have it stand out. I blend in a little scarlet into the shadows, followed by more of the blue-greenish. I bring in the sepia to get the shadows really dark. I go around and touch up more things in the area while I have the dark sepia out. I have another brain coral over on the right side here. This one looks even more like a brain coral. I come in with a layer of ivory over the whole thing. I touch up the side of the orange balls with a little more of the light cadmium yellow. Back to the coral. I bring in the sepia to hit up the shadows in the crevices and around the base of the coral. I'm going a little different with the color, not just the orange I did before, but something a little lighter. I feel like I am remembering that brain corals are beige, but maybe I'm misremembering. I come in with a light layer of the cadmium orange and blend it into the ivory. I don't want it to be too orange. I give it a light layer of the yellow and more ivory to blend it and tone it down. It doesn't stand out too much. I might have to come in and fix it after I get the background in if it still fades into the background too much. This clump of fan coral is going to be yellow with some green shading. I lay down a light layer of the yellow over all of the coral. I bring in the grass green along the base and shading lines already in place. I added more layers of the yellow and green to fill in the coral before coming in with the sepia to add in some shadows at the base of each blade. Above the fish, I see another ball that I missed earlier, so I'm hitting it up with a layer of yellow, some orange at the base, leaving a crescent of yellow at the top, and some scarlet at the base for a shadow. Using the same colors, I hit up this bean-shaped coral with things sticking out. I put down a base of yellow, then followed it up with orange, leaving the right side lighter. I added in the scarlet along the left edge where it is up against the finger coral. There is a little Nautilus-shaped shell near the cave, so I colored it up with ivory, then added in magenta stripes around the shell. Looks like a peppermint candy, so I might go in later and change that, but for now it is fine. Maybe it will be fine later. Or maybe I'll just forget. Down in the bottom, I put in a layer of the purple pink. I add in a shadow with the magenta. I did touch up some of the orange bubble coral that I had missed. I do think this pink coral could also be colored the same as the orange brain coral. I blend in some ivory over top and deepen up the shadows with some sepia. I add in more layers of the purple pink and more shadows with the magenta. Above the brain coral, there is something that looks leafy, so I'm going to make them green. I start with the grass green. I add in some shadows with the dark sepia and blend it with the cadmium yellow lemon. I put in a touch of the blue-greenish at the base to help darken the shadows even more. Coming in with the warm gray 5, I continue filling in the background rocks over this section. I bring in the sepia for shadows where I think I need a shadow. For the most part, most of the shadows are marked off with liner, so I just follow what the picture says. I will also go around and touch up any little bits of missed coral. With the green, I touch up some of the tips of the coral to brighten them up more, and the blue-greenish to deepen up the shadows more and bring up the contrast. I'm jumping back up to the top of the meteor and working on the background. I'm going to be working back and forth between the warm gray 6 and the dark sepia for this first part. I will come in and finish off more of the coral on this part too. I'm going to save the fish and turtles for later. I want to decide if I want to stick with the same palette throughout all of this, or if I want the sea life to be different and stand out. With the background filled in more, I can see what is left for coral. Just under the sea serpent, I see more round coral that I have been coloring up yellow-orange. So I come in with a light layer of the yellow over the pair of circles. With the orange, I add in some at the top of the first circle and in the middle of the second circle. I'll use the scarlet to further define the shadows in the center of the orange parts. The lines under the serpent's tail look like the continuation of the long pink coral, so I made them pink with more magenta at the base to make them look more shadowed. In the cave there is more bubble coral. I put in my base layer of yellow and give it a shadow with the scarlet and blend it with the orange and more yellow. They are pretty small and barely peeking out from the cave. The brain bubble coral I come in with the ivory for my base layer, then a light layer of orange in where the shadows would mostly be. A little yellow to blend it and more ivory for the whole coral. I bring in the sepia to finish off the shadows. Another bubble coral on the top here that I color up the same as the ones in the cave. Under the large clump of finger coral, there is part of a cave. On the one side I colored it up the same as the cave, so I decided to make this side match as well. I had already put in a little sepia at the base. I put in a light layer of the cobalt green over everything. I touched up some of the bumps with the grass green, but they are pretty small. I used the blue greenish to add in more shadows at the base. I blend in more green and cobalt green to help make it match the rest of the coral cave on the other side. I then fill in the cave interior with sepia. There are still little elements on this part of the meteor that need to be colored, but I'm going to move on from this section and come back to the little bits later. Tomorrow the next part of the candles coloring page goes up, but I'll be back on Monday with more from this double spread. I hope you've been following along. Please let me know. I'd love to know how your coral looks. I have my social media links below. Find me on Twitter, Instagram, MeWe, and Patreon. Patreon has a short write-up as well as all the palettes I am using and a list of the timestamps. You don't have to support me to see it. If you have any questions or page requests, please leave them below or reach out to me on social media. I put in a list of chapter breaks in the show notes as well as a list of equipment I like to use. If you use any of my affiliate links, it really helps me out without costing you a thing. I want to thank you all so much for coming along and joining in with me on this coloring journey. I appreciate all my subscribers and look forward to more of you joining in and coloring along with me. Please like, share, and subscribe to help that happen. Until next time, happy coloring!